They started clapping before I even realized I was being fired. It was the final 5 minutes of our regional Q3 meeting. Tobias Tavian stood beside me, one hand on my back like we were teammates, his voice smooth and practiced. Corporate perfect. Fian has decided to take some personal time away. This was a mutual decision, and a very difficult one. But we respect her choice. Lies. Every single word. My chest tightened as polite applause rippled across the room. I blinked. HR nodded like this had been planned. And it had been, just not with me. I hadn't resigned. I hadn't even known this was happening. My name was still on next month's schedule. There had been no conversation, no notice, no email. Just this. A scripted goodbye wrapped in fake gratitude and cold betrayal. I tried to speak. That's not, Tobias cut me off smoothly. Let's all give her the space and respect she deserves. Please, no questions. Everyone looked at me with soft, sympathetic eyes. Controlled. Manipulated. In that moment, I understood the game completely. If I fought back now, I'd look ungrateful. Bitter. The angry woman who couldn't accept change. That's what he'd set me up for. So I smiled. Numb and hollow, my heart pounding. I nodded like I was proud. And I let them clap me out of a job I never chose to leave. I wasn't even allowed to pack my own things. After the meeting, an HR representative with a polite but robotic smile asked me to step into the break room for a moment. When I came back 15 minutes later, my desk was already boxed up. Labeled. Taped shut. Like a coffin for everything I'd built over 4 years. I crouched down and opened the flaps carefully. Something was wrong immediately. My notebooks were missing. The black leather journal where I kept vendor contacts, gone. A flash drive I always stored in my top drawer, also missing. Even my old sticky notes, the ones where I'd scribbled expense red flags, were nowhere to be found. Someone had cleaned house before I could. Quietly. Deliberately. I looked up and saw Tobias standing by the glass wall of his office, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand tucked casually in his pocket. When our eyes met, he gave me the faintest nod. Calm, almost fatherly. Like he was doing me a favor. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about removing me from the company. This was about erasing evidence. My name is Fian Calloway. Tobias Tavian didn't fire me for poor performance. He fired me because I found what he'd buried. And I wasn't afraid to bring it to light. Back when I still trusted him, I'd made the mistake of sending Tobias a flagged report directly. One vendor invoice duplicated 3 months in a row, hidden under different project codes. He'd brushed it off. Called it interdepartmental noise. But I'd saved a copy. In my personal cloud drive. Along with dozens of others. The folder was labeled Q2 Audit Notes Review Later. Harmless. Boring. Invisible to anyone scrolling past. But inside that folder? Inflated numbers. Ghost vendors. Staff bonuses signed off without proper HR approval. Enough irregularities to make corporate compliance look twice. And Tobias knew it. That's why he'd started asking those careful questions weeks ago. Do you ever feel burnt out, Fian? Would you be happier in a slower role? Maybe it's time for something new? He'd been testing the narrative. Building the story he'd eventually tell. The one where I left voluntarily because I was tired, overwhelmed, not aligned with company values anymore. But what he didn't know was that I'd already started building my own story. And it ended with his name attached to every red flag I'd found. I opened my laptop that night in my apartment, pulled up the hidden folder, and started organizing everything chronologically. Dates, amounts, approvals. The evidence was damning. And it was all his. I didn't go home after leaving the office. I went straight to Isla's apartment. She was a junior analyst who owed me no loyalty but owed Tobias even less. We'd worked late together enough times for me to know she saw through his charm. We talked over wine and whispers in her tiny kitchen. You're not the first person he's done this to, she said quietly. But you might be the only one who kept records. That's when she handed me something. A printed email. Subject line, Scrub anything linked to Callaway before end of quarter. It had been sent from Tobias to the IT department 3 days before my firing. He'd accidentally CC'd Isla instead of someone else with a similar name. She'd printed it immediately and hidden it in her desk. I knew something was wrong, she said. But I didn't know what to do with it until now. I stared at that email for a long time. Proof that my firing was planned. Proof that he was covering something up. Proof that I wasn't paranoid or bitter. I was right. Isla poured more wine. What are you going to do? I folded the email carefully and put it in my bag. I'm going to find out exactly what he's hiding. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows. The first ghost vendor I investigated was Red Elm Consulting. Project code RD1482B. Amount $62,500. Approved by Tobias Tavian. I searched for Red Elm online. The company website looked professional at first glance. Clean design, stock photos, generic mission statement. But when I dug deeper, nothing connected. The address led to a UPS drop box in a strip mall. The phone number rang twice, then disconnected to static. The LinkedIn page had been created 8 months ago with no employees listed. Red Elm Consulting didn't exist. But the payments? Those were real. Company funds had been transferred to this ghost entity 3 separate times over 6 months. And every single approval bore Tobias's digital signature. He was moving money through fake vendors. Using my audit flags to catch the obvious ones, then quietly cleaning up before anyone else noticed. Until I got too close. Until I started asking questions he couldn't answer with his usual charm. That's when I became a liability. I made a spreadsheet that night. Red Elm was just the beginning. I found 2 more suspicious vendors with similar patterns. Minimal online presence, P.O. box addresses, disconnected phone lines. Each one approved by Tobias. The amounts added up quickly. This wasn't accidental. This was systematic fraud. The regional board loved Tobias. He kept everything running smoothly, hit quarterly targets, spoke like a visionary during presentations. So I knew I couldn't just walk into that boardroom with my evidence. Not yet. If I showed up now, I'd look exactly like what Tobias had painted me as. A bitter ex-employee with an axe to grind. Someone emotional and unstable, making wild accusations against a respected director. I needed more than spreadsheets and suspicions. I needed patterns. I needed a second set of eyes. Someone with credibility who could verify what I was seeing. I started reaching out carefully. Not to current employees, they were too afraid of losing their jobs. But to people who'd left the company on their own terms. Former colleagues who'd moved on to better positions. One of them, Marcus, had worked in vendor relations 2 years ago. When I mentioned Red Elm, he went quiet. I flagged that vendor, he finally said. Tobias told me it was confidential, above my clearance level. I dropped it because I didn't want trouble. What if I told you it's fake? Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then I'd say you need to be very careful. Because if Tobias is willing to fire you over this, he's willing to do worse. That warning should have scared me. Instead, it made me more determined. There was one name that kept appearing on compliance approvals. Jean Olcott, listed as an external compliance consultant. Her signature appeared on 4 high-level audits over the past year, including the ones covering Red Elm and the other ghost vendors. But when I searched for Jean Olcott, something didn't add up. According to LinkedIn, she'd been living in Portugal for the past 18 months. Working for a completely different company. Teaching English online. Her last post mentioned how much she loved being abroad, how she'd left corporate life behind permanently. Yet somehow, her signature was on documents dated just 2 months ago. Documents that required in-person verification and physical presence during audits. Which meant one of 2 things. Either Jean was lying about being abroad, or someone was forging her signature. I took a chance and messaged her directly through LinkedIn. Kept it vague, professional. Hi Jean, I'm doing some follow-up on compliance reports you filed for our company. Could we schedule a quick call? She responded within an hour. I haven't filed any compliance reports in over a year. I'm not even in that industry anymore. What company are you talking about? I sent her copies of the documents with her signature. Her response came back fast and furious. That's not my signature. Someone forged this. Who's in charge there? I gave her one name. Tobias Tavian. I met with someone from legal. Not company legal, they'd bury this immediately. A friend of a friend who specialized in corporate fraud cases. We met in a coffee shop far from the office, and I showed her everything. The ghost vendors. The forged signatures. The scrubbed emails. She reviewed it all carefully, making notes. When she finished, she looked at me seriously. This is solid. But you need to understand something. If Tobias has been getting away with this for years, he's being protected. Maybe by someone higher up. Maybe by people in HR or finance who benefit from looking the other way. So what do I do? She leaned forward. Don't go to the board empty-handed. And definitely don't go to HR first. If he's being protected, they'll bury your complaint and paint you as a problem employee. You need ironclad proof and you need it independently verified. How? Whistleblower protection. External audit. Someone outside the company who can verify these numbers without bias. She wrote down a name on a napkin. Ezra Penn. He's head of audit at a rival firm. Former prosecutor. If anyone can help you build an airtight case, it's him. I took that napkin and held it like a lifeline. This was becoming bigger than I'd imagined. But I'd come too far to stop now. I reached out to Ezra Penn through his professional email. Kept the message brief and mysterious. I have evidence of systematic financial fraud at a major regional company. Would you be willing to review it confidentially? He replied within 24 hours. Send me what you have. Redact any identifying information. Let's see if this is worth pursuing. I sent him redacted versions of the invoices, the forged signatures, and the timeline of approvals. He responded in less than 10 minutes. This is high-level laundering disguised as operational noise. Whoever did this knows what they're doing. Very sophisticated. My hands were shaking as I typed back. Is it enough? For whistleblower protection? Yes. For a criminal investigation? Possibly. But you need to move carefully. People who do this don't go down quietly. He agreed to meet me in person. 2 days later, I sat across from Ezra in his downtown office. He was older, maybe 50, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. You understand what you're starting here, he said. Once you blow the whistle, there's no going back. Your name will be attached to this. Some people will call you a hero. Others will call you a traitor. I just want the truth to come out. Ezra smiled slightly. Then let's make sure it does. Before I made my move, I needed to test something. I needed to know if Tobias was still watching me, still worried about what I might do. So I planted a trap. Through Isla, I leaked a fake piece of information. A dummy audit report with one specific line item duplicated on purpose. A small error that would only matter to someone actively looking for problems. 3 days later, Isla called me. That report disappeared from the system. Just gone. No trace it ever existed. My stomach dropped. He was watching. Actively monitoring what information was moving through the company. Scrubbing anything that might raise questions. Which meant 2 things. First, he knew I was still a threat. Second, he was scared. Scared people make mistakes. I started documenting everything from that moment on. Every email, every call, every search I did. I saved copies in 3 different locations. Cloud storage, external hard drive, and printed physical copies. Because if something happened to my laptop, if my accounts got hacked, if evidence mysteriously disappeared, I needed insurance. Ezra had been right. This wasn't just about exposing fraud anymore. This was about protecting myself from someone who'd already proven he was willing to destroy careers to keep his secrets buried. But I had something Tobias didn't. I had the truth. And I was patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to use it. 2 weeks after my firing, Tobias called me. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Fian, his voice was warm, friendly, like we were old colleagues catching up. I've been thinking. Maybe we rushed things. You were emotional that day, and we didn't handle it as well as we could have. If you'd like to re-enter the company through another branch, maybe in a consulting capacity, we could talk about it. A fake olive branch. A trap to get me quiet, to bring me back under his control where he could monitor me. Make me sign new agreements. Bury me in paperwork that would prevent me from speaking out. I kept my voice calm. That's interesting. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. I just want what's best for you. I recorded the entire call. Every word, every pause, every carefully constructed lie. When I played it back for Ezra later, he nodded approvingly. He's trying to contain you. Which means he knows you're dangerous. What do I do? You tell him you're considering it. Keep him thinking he's winning. Meanwhile, we build the case until it's bulletproof. So I sent Tobias a polite email. Thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the opportunity and would like to discuss it further. His response came back within minutes. Relieved. Eager. Wonderful. Let's set up a meeting next week. He had no idea I was building his cage while he thought he was building mine. Ezra helped me get an encrypted hard drive. Military-grade security, impossible to hack without the physical device and multiple passwords. I printed everything. Every report, every forged signature, every ghost vendor, every timestamp. Organized it all chronologically in labeled folders. Then I stored the hard drive in a private storage locker across town. Different from where I lived, paid for with cash, under a name that couldn't be traced back to me easily. This is your insurance policy, Ezra explained. If anything happens to your laptop, your phone, your email accounts, you have a clean backup that can't be accessed or destroyed remotely. It felt paranoid. Like something from a spy movie. But then I remembered how Tobias had scrubbed my desk before I could even pack it myself. How he'd erased reports from the company system. How he'd gotten Jean's signature forged without anyone noticing. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about how my life had changed in just 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, I'd had a stable job, a good reputation, a clear career path. Now I was hiding evidence in storage lockers and recording phone calls. But I also had something else. Purpose. Clarity. The absolute certainty that what I was doing was right. And that certainty was worth more than any job security. Then Tobias was promoted. Senior Regional Director. The announcement came through on LinkedIn. Public praise, glowing comments from colleagues. Well deserved. Brilliant leadership. Congratulations on your success. I sat in my apartment reading those comments, each one a knife in my chest. Not because I wanted the promotion, but because everyone was celebrating a fraud. Applauding a man who'd stolen company money, forged documents, and destroyed careers to cover his tracks. The comments went on and on. People I'd worked with, people who'd been at that meeting where I was fired, all of them congratulating him. Did they know? Did they suspect? Or were they just going along because it was easier than asking questions? I took a screenshot of every comment. Added them to my evidence file. Not because they proved anything legally, but because they showed the culture that had allowed this to happen. A culture where performance and charm mattered more than integrity. Where asking questions got you fired and going along got you promoted. Ezra called that evening. I saw the announcement. Yeah. How are you feeling? Angry, but more motivated than ever. He was quiet for a moment. Good. Use that anger. Channel it. We're almost ready. How much longer? 2 weeks. Maybe 3. We need one more piece. What piece? We need to know where the money went. That piece came from an unexpected source. Carla, Tobias's executive assistant. She called me from a blocked number late one night. Fian? It's Carla. Please don't hang up. I almost did. But something in her voice stopped me. I'm listening. I found something. In his office. Printed checks. Blank ones. He's been signing them on behalf of Jean Olcott. Forging her signature on actual financial documents, not just reports. My heart started racing. How many? I don't know. A dozen at least. I took pictures. Why are you telling me this? Her voice cracked. Because I can't work for him anymore. I thought he was just demanding, you know? Difficult. But this is criminal. And when you got fired that way, in front of everyone, I knew something was really wrong. Can you send me those pictures? Yes. But I need something from you. What? I need to know that when this comes out, I won't go down with him. I didn't know what he was doing until recently. I just want out safely. I understood that fear. I'd felt it myself. Send me everything you have. I'll make sure you're protected. I promise. 20 minutes later, my email pinged with encrypted files. Photos of blank checks. Forged signatures. Bank statements showing transfers to accounts I'd never seen before. Carla had just handed me the final piece of the puzzle. Ezra and I worked through the night organizing everything into one comprehensive report. We called it the Tavian file. Every ghost vendor, every forged signature, every suspicious payment, all connected back to one person. Tobias Tavian. But the real discovery was what he'd been doing with the money. He hadn't just been stealing it. He'd been funneling it into a private LLC. A leadership consulting firm he'd created under a different name. Then he'd been billing the company for consulting services from this fake firm. Essentially, he was paying himself twice. Once through his legitimate salary, and again through this shell company. All while making it look like the company was investing in leadership development. This is brilliant, Ezra said, and I heard the disgust in his voice. Evil, but brilliant. He created a closed loop. Steal from the company through ghost vendors, transfer it to his LLC, then bill the company for services from that LLC. Every dollar stolen gets laundered through legitimate-looking consulting fees. How much total? Ezra did the calculation. Conservatively, over $300,000 in the past 2 years alone. Probably more if we go back further. I felt sick. $300,000. While regular employees got denied raises. While projects got cut for budget reasons. While I'd worked weekends for no extra pay. Also Tobias could fund his secret empire. What's our next move? I asked. Ezra smiled. We trigger the trap. We created a drop folder accessible to the entire board of directors. Titled it something boring and routine. Weekly KPI Analysis Q3 Review. Inside, we placed our complete audit report. Every page documented, verified, cross-referenced. The file was set to auto-share at midnight the night before the next board meeting. By the time anyone woke up the next morning, every director would have the Tavian file in their inbox. This is your point of no return, Ezra warned me one last time. Once this goes out, everything changes. Are you sure? I thought about that meeting. About the applause. About Tobias's hand on my back while he lied to everyone. About all the other people he'd probably done this to before me. I'm sure. Then we send it tonight. At 11:58 p.m., I watched the timer count down. Ezra sat beside me in his office, both of us silent. When the clock hit midnight, the system automatically sent the file to 15 email addresses. The board of directors. The head of corporate compliance. The company's external auditors. And one investigative journalist Ezra trusted at the Business Journal. There was no taking it back now. The truth was out. And tomorrow morning, Tobias Tavian's world was going to explode. I barely slept. Just lay in bed waiting for sunrise, knowing that everything was about to change. Tobias walked into that boardroom at 8 a.m. exactly. I wasn't there, but Ezra had a contact who was. She texted me updates in real time. He looks confident. Sharp suit. Prepared presentation. At 8:02, the board chairman opened his laptop. Saw the file. His expression changed. By 8:05, every director was reading. I could picture Tobias's smile starting to falter, the confusion creeping in. By 8:15, according to my contact, the room had gone completely silent. Someone asked, "Tobias, can you explain these vendor payments?" I imagined his face going pale, his mind racing to find an explanation that would work. But there was no explanation. Not for ghost vendors. Not for forged signatures. Not for $300,000 moved through shell companies. "These files are manipulated," he apparently said. "This is from a disgruntled employee. Fionn Calloway. She was underperforming. This is revenge." But the board had already verified the account numbers. Already contacted Jean Olcott, who'd sent a sworn statement that she never signed those documents. Already pulled the real bank records that matched our report exactly. By 8:30, Tobias Tavian was asked to leave the room. By 9, his access badges were deactivated. By 10, the company had called in external investigators. And by noon, I received a formal request to provide testimony. Not as a suspect. As a witness. The whistle had been blown. And the whole building was coming down. I was invited back to the company. Not for reinstatement. For an internal investigation interview. I walked through those familiar doors with Ezra beside me, both of us carrying briefcases full of documentation. The HR director, who'd sat silent during my firing, now looked at me with something like respect. Or maybe fear. We sat in a conference room for 3 hours. I walked them through everything. The initial red flags. The ignored warnings. The forged signatures. The scrubbed evidence. The fake consulting firm. Every question they asked, I had an answer. Every doubt they raised, I had proof. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" the corporate compliance officer asked. I looked at her directly. Because I tried. I sent reports to Tobias. He buried them. I flagged vendors. He scrubbed them. And when I got too close to the truth, he fired me in a room full of people and made them applaud. So I had to build a case strong enough that no one could ignore it or bury it. The room was silent. "Your documentation is exceptional," the lead investigator finally said. "We'll need to keep copies of everything." "I have copies for you," Ezra said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Everything's time-stamped and verified." As we left, the HR director stopped me in the hallway. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We should have listened." I didn't respond. Sorry didn't give me back my job or my reputation. But the truth would. The internal audit moved fast. Within 48 hours, they'd confirmed 5 ghost vendors. By day 3, they'd traced over $300,000 in fraudulent payments. By day 5, they'd found Tobias's LLC and the consulting scam. By the end of the week, Tobias Tavian was suspended indefinitely pending criminal investigation. I watched it all unfold from a distance. News traveled fast through my former colleagues. Isla kept me updated. Carla sent grateful messages. Even Marcus, the former vendor relations guy, reached out to say he'd been contacted by investigators. The company released a carefully worded statement. "We take financial irregularities seriously and are cooperating fully with authorities." Tobias's LinkedIn went quiet. No more congratulatory posts. No more leadership wisdom. Just silence. Ezra called me one evening. "The district attorney's office is interested. They're considering criminal charges. Wire fraud, forgery, embezzlement. This could go federal." How long will that take? Months. Maybe years. But the evidence is solid. You did good work, Fionn. I sat with that for a moment. Good work. 4 years of my career, destroyed in one meeting. 3 weeks of investigation, planning, building a case while everyone thought I was just bitter. And now, finally, vindication. But it felt quieter than I expected. Less triumphant. More like exhaustion mixed with relief. Justice wasn't loud. It was just steady and inevitable. 2 weeks later, the story leaked to the press. Not from me. Probably from someone in the DA's office or the investigative team. But suddenly, headlines were everywhere. Regional Director under investigation for financial misconduct. Whistleblower exposes systematic fraud at marketing firm. Fian Calloway credited with uncovering 3-year scheme. My phone exploded with messages. Reporters wanting interviews. Former colleagues apologizing. Recruiters offering opportunities. Even my old university professor reached out proud. The Business Journal ran a full feature. They'd verified everything independently. Interviewed Jean Olcott. Talked to former employees. Examined public financial records. Their headline, How One Fired Employee's Audit Trail Brought Down a Corporate Star. I gave one interview. Just one. Kept it professional, factual. I saw irregularities. I reported them. When those reports were ignored and I was punished for asking questions, I felt obligated to pursue the truth through proper channels. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. The article went viral in business circles. My LinkedIn profile went from a few hundred views a month to thousands a day. But the strangest thing was seeing Tobias's profile. Someone had archived it. All his posts about leadership and integrity. People were sharing them ironically now. This you. Comments under his old wisdom about building trust and leading with honesty. His reputation was destroyed. Not by me attacking him. Just by the truth existing publicly. The real bombshell came 3 weeks later. The investigation revealed that Tobias's Consulting LLC wasn't just billing our company. He'd been running the same scam at 2 other companies where he'd held director positions years ago. The scheme was even bigger than anyone thought. Over 7 years, across 3 companies, he'd stolen nearly $1.2 million. When that news broke, the criminal charges multiplied. Federal prosecutors took over. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, tax evasion for not reporting the stolen funds. Each charge carried years of potential prison time. I got a call from the lead prosecutor's office. They wanted me to testify at trial. Your documentation is the foundation of our case, the attorney said. Without your audit trail, we'd have a much harder time proving intent and systematic fraud. I'll testify, I said without hesitation. Good. Because you're going to help put him away for a long time. Tobias tried to negotiate a plea deal. His lawyers claimed he'd made accounting errors and was willing to pay restitution. The prosecutors laughed. Accounting errors don't involve forging signatures and creating shell companies. By month's end, he was formally indicted on 14 counts. Each news cycle brought a new revelation. More victims. More companies. More lies. The man who'd been promoted to senior regional director was now facing up to 20 years in federal prison. HR called me for a formal meeting. I went with Ezra, not sure what to expect. The head of human resources sat across from us, looking uncomfortable. Miss Calloway, we deeply regret what happened. The way your departure was handled was inappropriate and unjust. We'd like to formally apologize. Additionally, there's interest in re-engaging you at a national level. Senior Compliance Officer. Significant salary increase. Full benefits restored. I looked at the offer letter they'd prepared. It was generous. More money than I'd ever made. A title with real authority. Everything I might have wanted a few months ago. I appreciate the offer, I said carefully. But I'm going to decline. They looked surprised. May I ask why? Because I'm not here to go backward. I didn't do this to get my job back. I did it because it was right. And now I want to build something better. The HR director nodded slowly. We understand. If you change your mind, the offer remains open. Outside, Ezra smiled. You really turned them down? I did. What are you going to do? I'd been thinking about that for weeks. Start my own compliance consultancy. Help other companies avoid what happened here. And help other whistleblowers who find themselves in the same position I was in. That's ambitious. So was taking down Tobias Tavian. Ezra laughed. Fair point. When do you start? Today. I launched Callaway Compliance Solutions 2 months later. My first 2 clients were companies that had praised Tobias publicly, then quietly hired me to audit their own systems after the scandal broke. They wanted to make sure they didn't have any Tobias Tavians hiding in their ranks. The work was satisfying in ways my old job never was. I wasn't just reviewing numbers. I was building systems to catch fraud before it happened. Training employees to recognize red flags. Creating cultures where people felt safe reporting problems. Isla joined me. So did Carla. 2 other analysts from my old company reached out asking if I was hiring. Within 6 months, I had a team of 8. Within a year, we had 15 clients across 3 states. The Business Journal did a follow-up feature. From whistleblower to entrepreneur, how Fian Callaway built trust from betrayal. I didn't talk about Tobias much in interviews. Didn't need to. His trial was public record. The evidence spoke for itself. Instead, I focused on helping others. On being the person I'd needed when I first found those ghost vendors. On creating a world where telling the truth didn't cost you everything. Sometimes former colleagues would reach out, asking how I'd done it. How I'd had the courage to go up against someone so powerful. I always gave the same answer. It wasn't courage. It was just refusing to pretend I didn't see what I saw. Tobias's trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on day 8. Walked through the entire timeline. Showed the jury the forged signatures. Explained how the ghost vendors worked. Demonstrated how the shell company funneled stolen money back into his pocket. His defense attorney tried to paint me as vindictive. Isn't it true you were fired for performance issues? No. I was fired because I found evidence of fraud. Isn't it true you held a grudge? I held documentation. There's a difference. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all 14 counts. Tobias showed no emotion when the verdict was read. But I saw his shoulders drop. Saw him age 10 years in that moment. At sentencing 2 months later, the judge gave him 12 years in federal prison. He'd also have to pay full restitution plus penalties. Everything he'd built with stolen money would be seized. The Business Journal headline, former regional director sentenced to 12 years for corporate fraud scheme. I didn't attend the sentencing. Didn't need to see it to know it was real. Instead, I was at my office, meeting with a new client, doing the work I loved. Ezra texted me the news. Justice served. I texted back, it always is. Eventually. That evening, I allowed myself 1 moment of reflection. Pulled up that old video someone had recorded of my firing. Watched Tobias put his hand on my back. Heard him tell those lies while people clapped. Then I closed the video and deleted it. I didn't need it anymore. I keep a folder on my laptop desktop. It's titled simply, Tavian Final. Inside are all the original documents. The audit trail. The evidence. The timeline that brought him down. I haven't opened it since the trial ended. Don't need to. Because I'm not defined by what he did to me. I'm defined by what I did about it. My company is thriving. We've helped expose 3 other fraud schemes at different companies. Recovered over $4 million for clients. Trained hundreds of employees to recognize and report financial irregularities. The work matters. Last week, someone asked me if I regretted how everything happened. If I wished I'd just kept quiet, kept my job, avoided the whole mess. I thought about it honestly. About the applause in that conference room. About the boxed-up desk and missing evidence. About the months of investigation and fear. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Because silence costs more than speaking up. It costs integrity. It costs truth. It costs other people who'll be victims after you. Tobias tried to erase me with a staged goodbye and forced applause. But I became the story he couldn't delete. Not because I was brave. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I was right. And sometimes, being right is enough. The truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be persistent. And I was very, very persistent.